Hello there, people of the internet. I can honestly, truthfully, and completely say that I love the gun community as a whole. I know that we give each other a whole lot of crap, and I know that we're constantly butting heads with one another. And I know that we, by a pretty huge margin, seem pretty gosh darn divided. And in a lot of aspects, we are. But I truly, genuinely believe that whenever push comes to shove, the gun community is going to take care of itself. I wholeheartedly, completely believe that. However, that being said, there's people in the gun community that I simply cannot get around. I simply cannot. I don't want to say I cannot tolerate them because I tolerate them on a pretty regular, gosh darn basis. But there's people in the gun community that I don't bother trying to explain anything to. Typically, whenever I'm dealing with people who are done learning in life, like they've decided that they know what they know and they refuse any new information, people like that I just don't bother talking to. Like for example, what's a good example? All right, yeah, here's a good example. I was down at a gun show probably about 6 months ago at this point. Wow, time is just flying nowadays. But I was down at a gun show and I was just browsing all the things that these guys had, and there was this old fud sitting at a table with everything overpriced, and he was definitely one of those guys who was like, "I know what I got, sonny." And the reason why I know that he was like that is because he had a bunch of old military surplus thing. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to buy anything because I'm not spending $1,000 on a Mosin, and he was ridiculously priced for the things that he had there. He had an SKS there for $1,200, and that's where I was like, all right, I'm not shopping at this table. But he had a 9130 Mosin Nagant, and it was rusted, and it was not in very good condition, and it was so rusted to the point to where you couldn't see the markings on the receiver. And he had it marked as a Carcano, however that name is pronounced, which is the Italian bolt-action rifle of World War II and earlier. But I told him, hey, this right here is a Russian Mosin Nagant. It's not a Carcano. And he says, my research says that it is a Carcano. I know what that is. And he, like, once he said that, he said a few other things that I just completely blanked out. It basically revolved around the notion of he knew what he was doing and I had no idea what the heck I was talking about. So rather than sit there and try to show him, hey, you can see the little Soviet hammer and sickle right here, and if you look up here on the barrel, you're going to find an import mark that says Soviet Russia 7.62 by 54R, which is a Russian round. But, like, rather than bother trying to explain that, I was like, all right, well, you obviously know more than I do, so I'll go ahead and just leave you there with it. And that particular Mosin was one that I probably should have got, because he was asking too much for it, but it was still less than what I would be able to find a Mosin for nowadays. But anyway, that's a good example of somebody who refuses to learn anything, and he refuses to listen to what anyone else has to say. When I was quite a deal younger, I get that I'm still a relatively young man, but whenever I was quite a deal younger, my father had said something to me that has stuck with me over the years. He said that the more he learns, the more he realizes he does not know. And I highly, highly encourage that people go out and they learn as much as they can. And don't turn into somebody who just wholeheartedly believes something is true and that there is no exceptions for anything. Here's another good example that I'm thinking about. So I load a bunch of my old military surplus rifles with black powder. I make it myself. I can make it for like $3 a pound. This way I can load my ammunition for basically next to nothing, especially if I cast my own bullets. But I load my military surplus rifles with 3F, and so whenever people ask me what kind of black powder do you use to load your rifles, I'm like, oh, I use 3F. I have had on at least a dozen different occasions People essentially yell at me, like full-fledged red face yell at me, tell me I am just stupid for loading 3F inside of a rifle cartridge because 2F is for rifles and 3F is for pistols. And if you put 3F, which is a faster burning black powder, inside of a rifle, you're going to blow your rifle up. And then I have to remind them, this is a smokeless powder rifle, something like 7.62 by 54R, that's what, 55,000 PSI, if memory serves me correctly, versus something like a black powder round, especially with the screen powder I'm using, you're looking probably more like 20,000 PSI if you really, really pack it in there. Essentially, you're going to get significantly less pressures with any type of black powder inside of your smokeless powder rifle, and the smokeless powder rifle is going to be able to handle it absolutely no problem. But because these guys are just so used to saying on repeat, 3F is for pistols, 2F is for rifles, because pistol powder in a rifle is dangerous, they refuse to learn anything else. And so even though this is a smokeless powder rifle, they just immediately jump to 3F black powder is going to blow the thing up, and it's simply not, especially because you can only shove like 60 grains of powder inside of these cases. Some of them you can shove a little more, some of them are a little bit less, but you guys get what I'm saying. There's a very, very minor charge, especially with screen black powder. I don't care if it's 2F or 3F, the gun's going to be fine. But yeah, if you're the kind of person to not want to learn anything new and to just repeatedly say what you've been saying for the past 50 years without taking any new information into account at all, then I hate to say it, but my hat's off to you. I'm not going to try and sit here and explain anything else. I've learned my lesson with trying that, and it just doesn't work. Here's another good example that I have seen people say over and over and over. The AK-47 is inaccurate. I have seen so many people talk about how inaccurate these rifles are, and I'll ask them, what ammo are you using? And they'll tell me like Toll ammo or Wolf or something like that. And the issues with those ammos is, yeah, those particular types of ammunition are inaccurate, not just because of the inconsistencies with the powder charge and the inconsistencies with those particular cartridges because they're stupidly dirt cheap, can vary by a lot, like up to 5 grains. But the big issue with those is they have bimetal jackets, and those who don't know what a bimetal jacket is, that's a steel jacket that's been like copper washed or copper plated or something like that. But that steel jacket is way, way, way harder than a copper jacket or some sort of copper alloy like what we see nowadays, which is like a copper and zinc or copper and nickel or something like that. A steel jacket bullet is way harder, and it is way more difficult for the rifling inside of your barrel to crush that jacket and spin that bullet properly. And that is one of the reasons why those are so dramatically inaccurate. If you go out with an AK and you run just proper copper jacketed ammunition, there's a couple of different brands out there that make it, and you make sure that your powder charges are consistent, then you're going to find that your AK can be pretty significantly accurate. As a matter of fact, some accuracy testing with an AK with proper ammunition would be a fun video. Have I done that yet? I don't think so. I got to keep track of all the videos that I've made because I've just been doing this for so long and talking about so many different things. But yeah, accuracy testing with an AK. But I'll tell them, hey, it's not the AK, it's the ammunition that they're using, and still on repeat I hear people tell me that the AK is just inaccurate, and people who say that on repeat tend to not be the kind of people to want to learn anything new. But those same sorts of people will also tell me that the SKS is more accurate than the AK, and I'm like, nah, it's pretty much all about the ammunition. Granted, the SKS does have a better trigger, and some people will say because the sight radius is slightly longer that you'll get better accuracy. I think that might matter at like a super long distance, but considering 7.62 by 39, it can really only touch out to about 400 yards unless you're a really, really good, adequate professional. Then I don't think it's gonna really matter in that context. That should be something that I experiment with as well. I'm getting some video ideas here. Anyway, there we go. There's my rant about it. Don't be the kind of person who decides that he is done learning. Anytime somebody tells you anything and it contradicts what it is that you've previously thought, then you should, of course, take it with a grain of salt because they might be wrong, but you should still be open to the idea that they might be right. Because more often than not, I have seen people be wrong and have the mindset that they're right, even though they are incorrect. Never stop learning, folks. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below has a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.